everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Minds. We're a little bit delayed this evening due to humongo technical issues. I was actually sending a Skype message to our guest this evening, Richard Dolan, and when I sent the message, everything just crashed down, and Skype is no more for me right now. So, but we are going to get there, and we're going to continue to roll on this evening. Before I bring in Mr. Dolan, I'd like to tell you a little bit about him. Richard M. Dolan was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1962. He holds an MA in history from the University of Rochester and a BA in history from Alfred University. He earned a certificate of political theory from Oxford University and was a Rhodes Scholar finalist. Prior to his interest in various phenomenon, Dolan studied U.S. Cold War strategy, Soviet history, and international diplomacy. In 2000, he published a 500-page study, UFOs and the National Security State. This is the first volume of the two-part historical narrative of the national security dimensions of the UFO phenomenon from 1941 to present. Included within this are the records of more than 50 military bases relating to innumerable violations of sensitive airspace by unknown objects, demonstrating that the U.S. military has taken the topic of UFOs seriously indeed. Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell has called Dolan's book monumental, while Dr. Hal Puthoff, director of the Institute of Advanced Studies at Austin, has declared it to be a must-read for serious students in the field. Dolan has published numerous articles on various phenomenon, science, and intelligence community, and the intelligence community for UFO Magazine. In 2003, he helped to found Phenomenon, a magazine dedicated to the leading-edge issues pertaining to science and society, and for which he continues to serve as senior editor and regular contributor. Richard Dolan also contributes to research and write Volume 2 of UFOs and the National Security State. He lives with his family in Rochester, New York. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Nolan. How are you doing, Mr. Nolan?
Hi, Shannon. That intro really takes me back. I should probably update that for you and for listeners a little bit more because
yeah, absolutely.
Phenomena Magazine, that ended a long time ago. It was about a decade ago. And I did actually finish my second volume of UFOs and National Security State a couple of years ago. There'll be a third volume that's on the way, and I also wrote two other books since that, which one was called AD After Disclosure, which is kind of a speculative look-see into, what if the secrecy on UFO were to end and how would that rock our world? And then I just finished a book a few months ago, which is a fresh overview of the entire subject of UFOs, which I've called UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, and that just came out this year in 2014. So I've been keeping myself busy.
Absolutely. And your book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, is one of the main books that I want to pick your brain about tonight, so to say.
Sure.
That was the only bio I could find, so I did my best. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's an old one.
Well, at least the good news is you're here to update it. That's what matters. And I want to personally thank you for being so understanding tonight of these humongous technical issues, because it was a nightmare.
Okay. Listen, we live in an era where these things happen all the time. Everything in flux. And we have to roll with it.
I'm telling you, it's just kind of like I'm about to start just warding off Skype altogether, because it's any time that I try to have a guest on with Skype, it's going to crash. Something's going to go wrong. It's Skype. That's the problem. Skype.
Yeah, it does happen. They give great sound quality, but sometimes there are the issues. It does happen.
Yeah, there's just it's the software compatibility issues, which is what it truthfully is. But anywho, so let's get to talking about you. And I kind of want to start off with just kind of scraping the surface back in the day about what contributed to your interest within the paranormal field, and then kind of like what left to UFOlogy.
Yeah, for sure. Like most people, I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to throw myself into this field. Absolutely not. As a younger person, I was in a very kind of conventional track in the academic world, and that was really always my goal, was to finish my PhD in history and teach at a university. And it was a world that I loved. It was a world that I did very well at. I felt that I was a natural for it, and my colleagues and advisors felt the same way. So by the early 1990s, I was deep in the heart of writing I'd written 150 pages of a doctoral dissertation on Harry Truman and the Russians, American Cold War strategy, 1950, and everything to do with it. So I was immersed in the world of the early Cold War in terms of my research. And up until that point, at that time I was about 31, 32 years old, I'd had limited interaction with the UFO subject, and I would say like an average level of interest. I wasn't into it. I wasn't a skeptic. I was nothing. It just wasn't really part of my way of thinking. But I stumbled into the topic. I saw a book, famous book, by the author Timothy Good called Above Top Secret. It was subtitled The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. And I will say that grabbed my attention, and I'll never forget, flipping through the book, seeing names that I recognized from my research that he had written about departments that I had studied and so on. But he put it in a totally different context. His context was these people were very interested in the flying saucer phenomenon in the 1940s and 50s. And I thought, wait a minute, that's interesting to me, because some of the documents that he had in there looked like they were legitimate. And I thought, if this is part of my nation's history, even if some of these high-level national security people mistakenly believe in UFOs, it didn't matter to me. If they were interested, I wanted to know, why had this been absent from every history book I'd ever read? How is that not interesting? It's very interesting. So I thought I'd like to explore this. I want to find out to what extent, if any, that this is a legitimate topic of inquiry. And that's really what started me down the rabbit hole, and that was 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago now. I started out so conservatively. Back then, I wanted to know, not were UFOs even real? I just wanted to know, was this a thing? Was this a thing that people cared about? And if it was, why was it? And if it ever was, did they ever stop being interested? And what I quickly found is that there were absolutely people in responsible positions in the military and in the intelligence community who were very interested in UFOs. And the reason is because these objects were being tracked by our military, visually and by radar, sometimes simultaneously, doing extraordinary things that were not supposed to be possible. They were violating sensitive airspace that you're not supposed to violate. They didn't look normal. That is, they looked like they were disc-shaped frequently. So all of these things, you start putting it together, and at least in my estimation, I thought, this is something important, and that's what really hooked me, and I've been in it ever since.
So, excuse me, my throat's like breaking up. But if you could go and, because you have such a long, complex history within UFOs, if you could just speculate, before we get into your book, UFOs of the 21st Century Mind, but if you could just speculate or even hypothesize on where you personally believe are the origins of UFOs. I know there's so much speculation currently out there, and you've probably even saw it evolve currently over time.
That's absolutely true. My thoughts on this have evolved. And I can tell you, I'll be happy to answer this, but I can tell you that I don't have a firm opinion about whatever it is I think on the origin of these objects. To this day, this is crazy. I've been studying this for 20 years, and it's one of the frustrating aspects of this incredible mystery, but it's also one of the great things about this mystery, that it is so elusive. But obviously, when I began looking into this, my main interest wasn't even my own opinion. It was, what did people in the national security community who studied this, what did they think? Mm-hmm. I can tell you that from the 1940s and 1950s, that many serious analysts did believe that the flying saucers were interplanetary. That was the phrase that they were using back then. They didn't say extraterrestrial. Interplanetary. So that these were essentially an alien species. And I've always felt that that's a reasonable hypothesis. I mean, look, space travel is, I mean, we have scientists who love to tell us how impossible space travel is in our society because they say, you don't understand how vast the distances between the stars are and so on. Well, fine, but we are in our own civilization this close to being able to genuinely think about interstellar travel. We're just about there putting all the pieces together. Within another 50, 100 years at the most, I think we're going to have that capability. It's not a long period of time. So I don't think that it's an impossibility for any other group to have come here. But the real reason I think it's still a possibility is when you talk about reports of encounters that people have had. And many of those encounters do seem to be with beings that they're not human and they're highly advanced. So I don't know where they came from. Maybe they came from Earth somehow and they've just evolved separately. But I think it's reasonable to assume that they may be extraterrestrial. Now, there are other possibilities. There's something very strange about the science and about the physics relating to this phenomenon, this UFO phenomenon. It's strange enough that it's caused people to think, is there the possibility that these beings can move in and out of our dimension of reality, whatever that even means. People love to talk about dimensions, and often when I hear this, I get the idea that they don't really know what they're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about when I mention dimension, when I talk about dimension half the time. I don't really think that our minds are quite up to it, to be honest with you. And that's one of the fascinating things about this phenomenon, by the way, and it was one of the main themes of my recent book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which is that I am convinced that this phenomenon does represent an intelligence that is past beyond what our human intelligence ordinarily can grasp. And so that when we are encountering this phenomenon in whatever way that we do, we're really pushing ourselves right to the limits, right to the frontiers of what our minds are used to handling. That doesn't mean that our minds can't expand further in the future to grasp it, but right now, we really struggle, I feel, to grasp this. So this is a truly great and profound mystery. And I do believe that the source behind this phenomenon, the fundamental source, is from an intelligence that is past our own. So I would consider it an alien in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's alien in the sense, I don't know that they're hostile per se. They may be somewhat indifferent. They may be somewhat benevolent. But even if they're benevolent, it's pretty evident to me that they can't simply just interact with us ordinarily. I don't think it works like that.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable. Now, out of all the books and all the research that you've done, do you have a most memorable UFO sighting, one that's stuck with you, or even one that maybe you experienced?
Yeah, well, I had two UFO sightings in my life that I would consider interesting. Neither of them were anywhere near as interesting as the accounts that I read about in my research, or people that I have personally spoken to have had encounters vastly more interesting than what I had. But I did have a pretty interesting one shortly before my first book came out in 1999. With an object in the daytime, and it was the brightest thing I'd ever seen in the sky other than the sun. It captured my attention. I looked away for 1 second, and it was gone. I looked away for 1 second, and it was gone. It was an odd thing, very odd thing. There's a couple of, in terms of amazing UFO sightings in our history, I mean, my God. It's almost like, if there were the big book of UFO sightings, you could just open up any page and point your finger down, and you would find something that is extraordinary. That's the thing about this phenomenon. What I like to tell people is, if you go online and look for UFO raw reports, that is just people sightings and things that they put up on the web, but the two main websites that collect reports, if you combine them, it's well over 10,000 reports a year in North America alone. Over 10,000 a year in North America alone. That does not mean that they're all extraterrestrial, alien, flying saucers, obviously. But I would say that if you go through those reports, a lot of them are really darned interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So there's a lot that's happening. But in terms of like a great case, just the other day I was chatting about a very little known series of events over a remote place up in Canada, north of where I live. I'm in upstate New York. A place called Goose Bay in Labrador. And in the 1940s and 50s, this is an Air Force base. It's currently a NATO base. But they had a lot of bizarre, high-altitude, high-speed objects being tracked and seen in that area over a number of years. Probably the best sighting, the most memorable one for me that I came across in my research is another Canadian case. A lot of good Canadian cases. This one I found in the Canadian National Archives. I was doing research up there. And it was written in by a guy who was very old at the time, in like 1980 or so. And he said that when he was a young man in 1936, he was 25 years old, he was doing what were called aerial mapping operations for the Canadian government. So he was up in the Northwest Territories with a little airplane, and he was flying around, and he was mapping the region, which they needed to have done at that time. And he said he had landed on his craft in the middle of nowhere. And he happened to look up, and he saw what he said was the most perfect configuration of an airship one could imagine. Now, again, it's the remoteness of where this man was that is truly amazing. To this day, there's no one that lives in this region for hundreds and hundreds of miles. There's nothing there. And it's almost impenetrable by foot. It's surrounded by very difficult terrain and thousands of lakes, and it's just hard. There's no roads up there. But he looked up, he saw this object that was slightly elongated against a perfect blue sky. It turned slightly, and then it zoomed silently, and within a matter of moments, it was gone. It was at the horizon. So it was right there above him, instant acceleration, and gone. That was 1936. What was striking to me about that was simply the meticulousness of this man's report. I mean, he was very exact. I even studied his handwriting, and I thought this man was just, his goal was, before he died, he just wanted to have a written record of this sighting, so he wrote it into the Canadian government. Yeah, I mean, and this is just one of hundreds and really thousands of similar types of sightings that people around the world have had. And normally they don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
You have this incredible sighting, and you just kind of sit on it for your whole life. Maybe you tell a couple of friends. And that's basically it. There's one of the amazing things about this topic is how widespread it actually is and how it continues to this day to be dismissed by what we would call our official culture, our official establishment.
Well, speaking of official culture and official establishment, there's a conversation I forgot to mention to you because we were kind of cut on time because of the debacle that happened before we came on air. But we have a chat box, and there's a conversation in the chat box talking about how the Pope came out and said he would baptize aliens. And so I just kind of wanted your opinion on that kind of cultural input there. Do you think he was just kind of being a smart aleck, or how do you
did you repeat that? Did you repeat that for me? How
the Pope came out and said that he would baptize aliens?
Oh, the Pope. Yes.
Yeah. And do you view that as him just being a smart aleck, or how do you view that?
No. I saw the headline, and I only glanced at it. I had a couple of things I was doing today, but no, this is very much in line with the Catholic Church's position on extraterrestrials for the last decade or more. The Vatican's had a very definite, serious interest in extraterrestrial life and in the possibility of extraterrestrial life. In that sense, I have to say it's a lot more forward-thinking than most of the mainline Protestant churches seem to be about this. Not long ago, that one of the top members of the Vatican hierarchy was a man named Monsignor Corrado Balducci. My brain is just turning fuzzy all of a sudden. Anyway, he was a close friend of John Paul II, and talked very openly about his belief in extraterrestrial life and also his belief in UFOs. And he expressed this as a personal belief, but nonetheless, when you're a high-level ranking member of the Vatican and you go public about something like that's rather important. The Vatican's also had a number of high-ranking astronomers who are very, very open about their belief in extraterrestrial life. So this is really not that surprising. Maybe the Vatican simply wants to be on the right side of disclosure if and when that happens in the near future.
That is a possibility for sure.
Covering your bets.
Yeah.
I'm quite serious. I think that might be the case. You never know.
Covering your rear end, so to speak. So, are you scared or intrigued by UFOs, and what do you believe the general public should be?
Well, I gave up being scared about things a long time ago. I mean, I'm very aware that we have a world that is in serious crisis and relating to many things. I think the UFO phenomenon does have it's easy for us to overlook just how important it is because it is absent really from a serious conversation in our public discourse. I'm intrigued by it. I've always been someone who can't resist a real mystery, and this to me is the greatest mystery of our time. And I truly want to get to the bottom of it. Now the issues are serious. We're at a point where humanity is, in my opinion, we're about to kind of leap into their world. We're poised to achieve advanced artificial intelligence, very, very advanced artificial intelligence, and very advanced computing capabilities far beyond what we can even do now. And I think in a matter of a generation or two, we're going to have the ability to be even a greater nuisance to any of these other beings than we are today. I think so. And we're going to be a management problem.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. So, I mean, one of the reasons I think this is it's become very evident to me when you look through the many cases of these objects that they've had a strong interest in our nuclear technology. And I say this because right from the early years, from the 1940s onward, an inordinate number of sightings did seem to occur over our nuclear sites where we had nuclear technology, whether it was Los Alamos National Labs in the late 1940s, Oak Ridge Nuclear Facility in the 1940s and 50s, and a number of other nuclear manufacturing facilities, as well as missile launch control facilities. Through the decades, it's very obvious to me that these objects and beings have an interest in it. I spoke to at length to two U.S. Navy personnel who were active duty in the 1960s who told me point blank that during high atmospheric, stratospheric nuclear tests in the 1960s, there were always UFOs, they called them bogeys, that were in the vicinity and that would just disappear right before detonation. I wrote about this in my new book, in fact, from 1963, an operation known as Dominic, which was a series of high-altitude explosions over the Pacific Ocean. Lots of nukes were being detonated back then.
Yeah.
And so they were commonly, accompanied by UFOs. So when you ask this question, am I intrigued or frightened? I'm more intrigued. Now, there's one caveat. a number of individuals. This has not happened to me. I've not had an encounter that I'm aware of in any way. But I've spoken to people who've had encounters, and some of those encounters can be really difficult to handle for people psychologically. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for skeptics to kind of laugh all of this off and laugh at people who've had apparent abduction experiences. Neil deGrasse Tyson loves to make fun of these people. Mm-hmm. It's really beneath him, and he should stop.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that these individuals, whatever they've gone through, has been deeply upsetting to them. Mm-hmm. They've had an encounter with a being that can basically strip your soul naked and get inside your mind. And it's a very unsettling thing for people. Mm-hmm. So somehow, when we encounter them, we struggle to get to a level where we can kind of have a psychological shield, kind of like our normal defenses that we have with other people. We don't have that with these beings. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, at the same time, when they do seem to take people, these people are under a total neurological control. That is, you're not going to move a muscle if they don't want you to move a muscle.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're necessarily evil, it's that this is how they do things. So there's a definite fear factor element of all of this that I think cannot really be denied. Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit to your new book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. And to all of our viewers, Richard's two various websites have been up on your screen throughout the night. The first one's www.richarddolanpress.com. And then the other one is, let me not butcher it too bad, www.afterdisclosure.com. Both websites have been up on your screen.
Yes. Yeah, the After Disclosure site was created by myself and my co-author of that book, Bryce Zabel, a couple of years ago. And that's a great site because we have a lot of articles that we put up there by ourselves and also by a couple of guest writers as well, all on the theme of disclosure. And that's a great site. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yes, sir. And speaking of disclosure, and still kind of touching on, abductions and things of that nature, I do kind of want to round this out and kind of end it with, do you possibly think at all that the government is so hesitant and so secretive and refuses to disclose and refuses disclosure because of their inability to say we can protect people from abductions and we can protect people from what goes on?
That is definitely part of the problem. I would say the biggest element of the disclosure dilemma, the reason that the power brokers who have the secret don't feel that they can give it up, is because disclosure is the ultimate multifaceted problem. No matter any way you look at disclosure, you are faced with a huge nightmare of a problem. So one is, yes, how do you convince the public that they're safe? How do you basically reassure the public, especially when you yourself may not have total control over the situation? And that's just very likely the fact. Mm-hmm. That is a problem, and that would include abductions, but there's a lot of other issues involved here. Part of it is simply a problem of having kept the secret for so long. It's like a person who's had an affair on their spouse for 50 years.
Yeah.
If you've had it for 6 months, that's one thing. If you've had it for 50 years, it becomes really difficult, right?
Yeah.
To kind of come out with that secret. And this has gone for even longer than that. And so you would have a really difficult situation where people would say, wait a minute. How have you kept this secret all this time? We've lived our whole lives under this lie. There'd be a lot of angry people, and they would want to know also the actual structure of the secrecy. That is, what are the organizations that have been running this? How have you been getting your funding? All of this would get into things like we would call black budget issues and secret government issues, and that would not be fun for them to talk about. And then it gets even further still with disclosure, which is, that means UFOs are real. So the obvious question is, what's their source of energy? How do they do what they do? And whatever that answer is, you could say goodbye to the petroleum industry, mm-hmm. at least as we currently understand it. And that's a very important factor because that's essentially what runs our world. And the people who own and control the petroleum industry are the people who control banking and finance, by and large, people who control international politics, by and large. And so this is a huge factor. And it just keeps going from there. I mean, disclosure is the ultimate game changer. It would transform our vision of who we think we are in the universe. It would also transform our vision of who we think we are here on planet Earth. And, you know, any power broker that's got the goods on this topic, that knows the answer, they have to be very, very hesitant before they give this up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to switch gears and dive headfirst into UFOs for the 21st Century Minds. And I do want to comment, there was, well, your graphics, I don't know if it's on all of the covers, but it's absolutely funny that your like brains cracked, your head's cracked open, and like some UFOs. That's hilarious. I love it. But
I'm glad you like it. Yeah, you know, some of the old guard UFO researchers, like the old people, they were the only ones who really complained about it. They said, "You're not taking this subject seriously enough. You got people making fun." I said, "Just shut up. Talk to the hand."
Yeah.
I said,
I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I think it's very eye-catching. It makes you want to go, what is this about? Now, hang on a minute.
Absolutely. Absolutely is what I wanted. And by the way, this book, I love this book. I love this new book. And the reason I wrote it is because this topic, this subject has never had the kind of book that I just wrote, which is a truly fresh overview of the whole subject of UFOs in a way that's really easy to grasp, but that's still sophisticated. I mean, it really is, in my opinion, if you've got a smart but somewhat skeptical friend and their attitude is, what's up with UFOs? Why is this a big deal? This should be the book they read because that's who I wrote it for. Having said that, I've had a lot of experienced researchers tell me that they got a lot of new perspectives and information out of this book. So it's not just for novices. And there's a lot of what will be in my third volume of history has appeared in this book as well. So there's a lot of contemporary, today's stuff in here. But really what it is a fresh appraisal of this subject in all of its incredible complexity and mystery. And in 500 pages, I really did my best at trying to grasp all of it and to give my current thinking on this subject. So that's what I wanted to do.
So let's start diving in a little bit to the book. If you had to evaluate, I think everybody's kind of aware of, you know, what the challenges have been previously in history for those who were interested in UFOs and wanted to study the phenomenon. But if you could look at from right now on, what would you speculate would be the challenges for investigating UFOs in the 21st century world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was one of my chapters. I had chapters that dealt with the history from ancient aliens today. I had chapters that dealt with the politics and the politics of the cover-up. But one of my chapters did deal with the challenges of this topic, particularly in our era today. This isn't like, 1985, right? It's a totally different era where it's not only just that we have internet. I mean, God, we've got YouTube, we've got Facebook, the ultimate in information exchange, and also rumor mongering. It goes both ways with Facebook. Mm-hmm. So, contrasted with the situation of, say, circa 1980 or 1950, the big problem then, if you're interested in UFOs, the big problem then would be to get access to reports. It was not easy to find them. Mm-hmm. Getting a database. Today, the problem is exactly opposite. Today, the problem is we are flooded with information and claims. I mean, it's too much for any one person to handle. It's certainly too much for me to handle by myself. Mm-hmm. I can't go through 12,000 reports every year in North America. I don't have that capability.
Yeah.
And then to say nothing of the countless videos of alleged UFOs on YouTube. Mm-hmm. There are hundreds of those every single year. I mean, I remember even a decade ago that when there wasn't YouTube didn't exist 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And even then, getting access to UFO video was not the easiest thing. It was only just starting to become widespread. So we're in a new era. So the biggest challenge that we face moving forward is the challenge of independent critical thinking by people interested in this subject. And by that I simply mean people who are serious about this subject are going to need to do a little bit better than simply copy and paste the latest rumor that they heard from some website that sounded like it was legit, or from some guy who seemed like he was sincere. There are certain principles of investigation, and I talk about this, by the way, that we really need to try to remind ourselves of, and also very practical tips. And I have a little bit on that as well. So in other words, how to do a reverse image search, how to investigate a photograph or an image to see where it came from, or how to do a Google search by date to get to the origin of a particular claim. So if someone, throws out a claim there that you've never heard before, it's possible to find the first example of that claim. You can go back now through 25 years of the web, or a little over 20 years, and you can very probably find the origin of many claims that are out there these days. And that's important because when you find where something comes from, it gives you a better idea of how to gauge its authenticity. So there's a lot of things. It's basically critical thinking and me telling people, slow the hell down.
Yeah.
When something comes your way, don't freak. And but then also, be fearless in trying to subject something to some critical analysis. And don't be afraid of a case simply because it looks spectacular. It may very well be the real deal. Mm-hmm. But I think, moving forward, we have a real issue with critical thinking. And what I honestly think is that we're going to get to a critical mass, a kind of a breaking point with all of this because of technology, because of where we're moving. Probably within another decade, I think it could really happen that something will occur, whether it's a WikiLeaks type of event, or something leaks, or Edward Snowden, or something like that, mm-hmm. where a document or some sensitive information will come out that will be very difficult for the power structure to deny.
Yeah.
And that may force something. Now, that's a possibility. Another possibility can be a mass type of a sighting that is multiply recorded on various devices. Mm-hmm. Now that's a little trickier. I used to think that was more likely, but a couple of years ago there was an alleged event over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem that I think there were at least 4 videos of that, and when I first saw that I thought, wow, this looks really, really good. Well, one of them turned out to be absolutely fake, and the other 3 have been very much disputed, and there's still no independent eyewitness testimony. So that didn't turn out to be what it looked like it might be. But I do think that there can be an event like that mm-hmm. that can occur in the future. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
When it happens, I think disclosure is one of these things that's going to happen very suddenly without warning. I don't think it's mm-hmm. going to be something that the government or any government's going to say, okay, it's time to disclose. That won't happen.
They'll have no choice but to do it.
Yeah, they're going to be pressed to the wall. Something will force it, and then they're going to continue to lie, because that's what governments do. But the difference will be that this topic will now be a matter of legitimate public discourse, and people will be able to talk about it much more openly than before. Mm-hmm. And that will be the difference. And that might be the game changer.
Speaking of social media and YouTube and videos of that nature, I do want to kind of switch a little bit and be a little bit of a devil's advocate here. And I know that in a lot of ways it can help the UFO field with exposure and, everybody being able to record and stuff like that. But do you think that it at all takes away from the legitimacy of the field, since so many people can fake it and so many people try to get, recognition off of it?
Oh, it's a huge problem. Absolutely, you're right. A lot of the fake videos out there aren't even by people trying to pull one over on UFO researchers. It's simply sometimes it's someone who's doing their senior project for their videography class in college. Mm-hmm. Whatever. And these things get out there. So, the fact is that there are many sophisticated, particularly young people, who really are got some great chops of video creation and editing, and they just do it. And sometimes they just do it because it's fun. You know, they're not thinking, oh, I want to mess with the researchers. They're not thinking it through that far. But it does dilute the field. It does make it very difficult, and that is why one of the things I try to point out in this book, and as well as in my public talks, is simply that video evidence by itself is never going to be sufficient as evidence. It has to be supported by feet-on-the-ground investigation conducted in a competent way. And this is why, the very few UFO organizations that exist are potentially of such great value and need to step up their game, by the way. And I'm thinking of organizations like MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which has been around for almost 50 years. And they actually do have a core of reasonably trained investigators, some of them anyway, who go out there and they collect data from sightings. And that type of thing actually is very important. We need much, much more of it than we have now.
Yeah, I would agree with that 110%. So what would you say, kind of finishing off about the book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which is available on Amazon, I know for a fact. What would you say, that people's reactions have been about this book, and how do they appreciate the grand scope of this book and how much area it covers?
I haven't really gone through the Amazon reviews lately. They seem to be very positive. I can tell you that the individuals who've given me feedback on it do seem really to love this book. I've had a number of people said that this is the best thing that they think I've ever written. As I was putting it together, I did feel that. I actually do believe that this is the deepest and the farthest and the most, it's the bravest thing I've ever written. After 20 years of reflecting on this incredible subject, to write a book that it's kind of like my version of the everything book of UFOs. It really is my attempt to grasp it in all of its complexity, but to do so in a way that makes sense, and that's clear. That's really what I wanted to do. I'm a historian by my training, and I practice history, but I think at heart I'm still a writer first and foremost. I love writing. I love communicating, expressing ideas, sometimes complex ideas, in a clear way, as clear as I'm able to, because I really believe that people have a right to know this stuff. And it was important for me to take this subject and to present it in a way that any person could read and go, wow, that's fascinating. And the big takeaway that I want people to have with this book and with this subject is simply that we may never get the full solution to everything that we want to know about UFOs. I mean, after all, it's been a tremendous mystery and a puzzle for an entire human lifetime and maybe longer. But that does not mean that this is not worth the journey of exploration. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I've done this now 20 years, and it's transformed, it's made a change in me for the better. Yeah. It's a challenge, but it forces you to confront your society, confront your civilization in a critical way, and it forced me to go through a process of deconstructing and then reconstructing my reality. And that's never easy, that's never fun, but it was a great challenge, and it was a great adventure. So that, in other words, the UFO topic, it's like a crowbar that, you get into it and you think, oh, I just want to know this one little thing about, are UFOs real, But when you get into it, it's like a crowbar that lifts open this very, very kind of heavy door that leads to a whole new paradigm reappraisal. I mean, it takes you far beyond, metal ships coming from another galaxy. It takes you into issues that are truly profound, that really cause you to try to reevaluate your entire civilization and your entire place within the cosmos. So that's why it's worthwhile. And that's why it deserves the attention of intelligent people who really give a damn about their life and about finding proper meaning in their life. This is an incredible subject that will allow that. that transformation to take place.
Yeah, and I agree with that 110%. Do you, before we change gears, one more question. Do you believe that religious and religion at all withholds people from being more accepting of this topic?
Yeah, I think certain religions, basically, living here in the United States, I would say some of the more conservative Christian religions, I think can get in the way, yes. They can also influence how people interpret this. I have a lot of very devout Christian friends who look at the UFO topic as basically demonic, and they interpret that through the Bible. And that's fair if they want to do that. That's not exactly how I look at it. I don't think that's precisely how I see it. But we are in a realm of interpretation here. I would say in general that religions, and I'm thinking of basically the big three desert sky god religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I think they have a tendency, particularly Christianity and Islam, they have a tendency to kind of create a mental shackle over forward-thinking people. That absolutely does happen. I mean, look, you're talking about faiths that started thousands of years ago, when human civilization was in a totally different frame of mind, a totally different level of knowledge about its place in the universe between then and now. And yet those religions still have hold over the minds of billions of people. That doesn't mean that the religion has to be this backward, medieval, barbaric formulation, but it still often does turn out that way from my perspective. There are, many more intelligent, sophisticated formulations of Christianity and Islam that can work in today's world, but frequently you find that that you get the kind of retro versions that still dominate. And I don't think that those are helpful, no.
Yeah. And I think I would agree with your perspective a lot.
I would add that when I look at some of those religions, they basically they're like Saturday morning cartoon versions of spirituality. In other words, it's basically a religion that's just one story after another. It's like superhero stories. Jesus did this, Muhammad did that, Moses did this. It's storybook time. And that's when you really think about it, that's not what spirituality should be about, should it? I mean, I don't think so. And yet this emphasis on like these heroes making miracles and doing this, that's just not my sense of where I would want to go with a spirituality in the future. Some may disagree with me, but I think
I would agree with you a lot. You have a lot of the same viewpoints that I have on that aspect of that. So in our last minute or two here, I do want to give you an opportunity just to tell our viewers, what kind of things you have going on. You mentioned you did public speaks. If you have any kind of big events coming up or anything like that.
I do indeed. I should put this on my website on richarddolanpress.com. I haven't, but I'm about to embark in a little over a week from now on a 3+ week-long tour of Canada. I mentioned Canada to you before, maybe it's on my mind. I have a couple of Canadian friends. They've organized a 12-city tour going from the east coast of Canada to the west coast, from Halifax to Vancouver. It is called the Modern Knowledge Tour of Canada, and I would encourage people, actually, to check it out. If anyone is going to be in Canada during the last week of May and the first 2 weeks of June, I would encourage them to go to modernknowledge2014.com, and they'll see a schedule there, and you can get a ticket. I mean, I'm speaking in 12 cities. There'll be other really interesting speakers along the way. Michael Tellinger, a South African researcher, will be with me the whole time, and a number of other people will be there locally to speak. Stanton Friedman and Linda Moulton Howe and Graham Cameron and many other well-known figures will be giving lectures. And it's not just on UFOs. Some of it will be on politics and GMO foods and financial corruption and banking and cover-ups of all different types. So I think it's going to be really cool things. I'm doing that starting next week, a little over a week from now, the Modern Knowledge Tour of Canada. After that, I've got a bunch of things. I'm doing something in the Bay Area at the end of June called the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference. And then I got a whole bunch of things lined up for later in the year.
It sounds like you're going to be a busy guy.
It never stops. And, you know, the crazy thing is that I write my own books and I publish books by other authors. And it's hard for me to get research done when I travel, but I try now. I bring not one but two laptops with me now.
Oh, my goodness.
And I have to do it so that any extra moment of writing and research I can get done, I try to do that.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. Well, Mr. Dolan, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight and being with me tonight and being understandable of my Skype debacle. Jeez, it's going to be like the notorious one of 2014, I think.
I had a great time talking with you.
Thank you. And one more time for all of our viewers, you can check out Mr. Dolan and his book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. You can get that book on Amazon, but you can check out his websites at www.richarddolanpress.com, which is up on your screen right now. And you can also find information, like Mr. Dolan has mentioned, about some great articles at www.afterdisclosure.com, which is also up on your screen as well right now. I want to thank everyone for tuning in with us this Tuesday. And next week, I will be talking with Samantha E. Harris. So be sure to tune back in at the same time, same place, same me. No technical issues, though. And I'll see you next week. Everybody have a great week. I'll see you back. Bye, guys.